Hello everyone, Daniel Kerr here. Driving around in my van this morning, just dropped my kids off for bug camp. My girls want to be entomologists, at least one of them, very badly. And so we got her a little camp and a future internship at the biopark in Albuquerque, where she'll be working with entomologists at the bug area. So I want to talk about a few things, right? If you look in the New Testament, you'll find Paul talking about the flesh versus the spirit, all right? And there are a lot of verses where he talks about the works of the flesh being basically the carnal or fleshly man. Carnal is meat, skin, flesh, right? That's what carnal means. Incarnate means in the flesh. And he talks about how being in the flesh and operating from the flesh is basically enmity with the spirit, and how the Spirit of God and the Spirit of man and the redeemed Spirit of man always wants to work contrary to the works of the flesh, right? The works of the Spirit are contrary to the works of the flesh. They're always combating, right? Paul talks about that which I struggle not to do, I end up doing, and basically he talks about at one point a messenger of Satan, right? And it's interesting because he talks about a messenger of Satan. The word is angel, right? Agolos. He talks about a messenger of Satan has given him a thorn in the flesh, right? And then he says, Lord, I need you to take this from me. And God says, well, I'm not going to take it from you. My grace is sufficient for you, right? That doesn't mean that the thorn in his flesh was God's will, all right? What that means is that he, for whatever reason, was attracting this thing to himself, right? It's the Apostle Paul here. Could have been pride, honestly. He's a pretty prideful guy. He goes into detail about, no one should boast, but if I were to boast, this is what I'd say, and go on big tirades about, he'd also talk about the simplicity of the gospel, and then go into another tirade that mental and verbal gymnastics such that he had to piecemeal every single phrase that he said to try to ascertain what he was actually saying. But I digress. So the works of the flesh are contrary to the works of the Spirit. So if we talk about somebody's fleshly nature, we're talking about the worst part of them. We're talking about the part that is in accordance with the lust, with animal instinct, right? When we talk about the lusts of the flesh, we're talking about the desires that we have because we live in a skin suit, because we live in an animal body, right? So the animals in nature, biosurvival is everything. Fear is literally what keeps organisms alive. Everything always eats another thing, right? They call it the great circle of life, but this is a fallen world, and we know that it's the great circle of death, all right? So fear and instinct is to protect your own interests, your own family, which is your biosurvival. It all comes back to fear of death. Hoard food, war over territory, right? Be jealous of a potential mate. These things. This is all the lusts of the flesh: to steal and to kill and to protect at all costs, right? And we know that love, perfect love, casts out all fear. That love is what acts contrary to fear and to the lusts of the flesh, right? So along those lines, right, in this war against our flesh and in this nurturing and fostering of the Spirit, where our mind is the middle ground, okay, and the ego, the part that's listening to me talk right now, and the part that's talking, right, the ego, our conscious mind is such that we are in a constant struggle against the flesh, okay, and in a constant struggle to trust God enough that we can purify our flesh based on His promises, okay? Now, in that light, take into consideration what's written in the Old Testament and what was repeated by Jesus when he discusses the marriage of a man and a woman, okay? He says, for this reason, a man will leave his father and his mother, right? And join to his wife, and the two will become one flesh. When I started thinking about this and started realizing that when I got married, multiple times, by the way, I'm on my third marriage, right? Full transparency. When I was young, I had no idea what the lust of the flesh really was about. I knew that I liked myself and wanted to do everything that I could to satisfy every desire, right? I wanted to satisfy every hedonistic desire as a young man. And the wives that I married wanted to too. And it didn't always work out. But once I was a redeemed Christian and in a marriage, I realized in the current marriage that I'm in now, we've been married for 15 years, more than 15 years. And when I realized that the two will become one flesh, meant that I was taking on all of the worst parts of her nature, and that she was taking on all of the worst parts of mine, the whole entire shebang made a lot more sense. Right? The whole entire scenario started to explain itself. Right? So, along those lines, when you're in your marriage, you realize that the marriage between a man and a woman is illustrated by the marriage between Christ and the church. And you realize the self-sacrifice that Yeshua the Christ employed while he was here, and the deeds of sacrifice that he committed to bring us complete fitness in mind and in body and in spirit. And when we realize that he would have done this, whether there was a single person who accepted his gift or not, because it was a completely selfless act, I encourage you to think along these lines when you are considering your own marriages between yourself and your wife. Consider how she has had to put up with your shortcomings and the sinful nature of your flesh, and then think about how you are required to sacrifice everything to bring her perfection until she reaches the full measure of the stature of Christ. And know that not only does she share your sinful nature and you share hers, but that means you guys can hold each other back and encourage each other. Anyway, just something to think upon. I've got more music tutorials coming this week. I've been neglecting those things because I've got big business deals going on between my supplement company and new investors in Denver. I love you guys, and I hope that you are enjoying the summer weather so far. It's been uncharacteristically cool here in Albuquerque. We've gotten a lot of water as well. Maybe not so recently, but it's pretty good. I really like it. Love you guys. Be blessed.